Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. This week, I wanted to talk about some of my favorite street level superheroes. I'm as big a fan of cosmic comics as anybody. I love some Kirby Crackle, I love some aliens and silver dudes on surfboards and all that sort of thing. But there's something romantic about the vigilante angle and when a hero, takes things to the streets. So today I want to talk about some of my favorite street level superheroes and what makes them such cool comics and why I think that sort of storytelling is as important as anything else in comic books. Coming in at number 5 is Brian Michael Bendis' Alias from 2001 to 2004. Guys, you probably know Jessica Jones best for the Netflix series they did based on the character, but Alias was a huge comic when it came out, and it really helped redefine Marvel Comics for an older, I should say, generation. Alias helped kick off the Marvel Max label, which was more like R-rated comic books, something they really weren't doing up until that point. And it told the story of Jessica Jones, a former superhero gone private investigator who could use her, supernatural powers to solve crimes. And you have her, crossing paths with Captain America and unraveling conspiracies, and Black Widow makes an appearance, and Matt Murdock is Daredevil, and Luke Cage features prominently. I think it was a really cool book that told a different side of superheroics, and one where, the superhero plays the role of the investigator, the detective, in a way that was pretty realistic and pretty gritty and really had that street level feel a lot more than most comic books do. At number 4 for me is Matt Fraction's run on Hawkeye. I've probably mentioned it a little bit before. I think I mentioned it in my What to Read After Invincible video. This run on Hawkeye is, in my opinion, the best run on the character ever. And also, I don't know that it could ever be topped. I almost wish there was one like this for every Marvel character. So basically the idea is Clint Barton is off duty. It's like post Avengers. He's gone home, basically. He's not on call this week or whatever, right? And he's back at his apartment block and he's off the clock. And it's like the human side of Clint Barton, this human side of Hawkeye, kind of out of uniform. And I don't know if you've ever seen Hawkeye, during that West Coast Avengers run, where he wears this really funny shaped costume with a big H in the middle of his head. It's very flamboyant. It's very silly, really. But this run, and not only is Matt Fraction's writing so good and brings so much humanity and realism to the character, but David Aya's art is super, super fitting tonally. It's almost like the storyboard of a 70s movie. There's this one issue, I can't remember off the top of my head which one it is. I should probably look. There's a car chase that reminded me so much of that Steve McQueen movie, Magnum. And it's drawn exceptionally. And you really, even though there's hardly any dialogue, maybe no dialogue, you really feel that scene come to life. And I thought that whole arc where Clint Barton is dealing with those neighborhood block gangsters and just solving people's problems on a day-to-day basis on that small a level, taking Hawkeye, that superhero, and bringing him right down to the really common person's level, bringing that really right home. I think that's awesome. And I think it's a great run. And it's another huge, although albeit different example of street level heroics. And that's why I'm putting in my top 5 street level hero books. Now, where would I be if I didn't put the Punisher on this list? Most people, I think, really, really loved Warren Ellis's Punisher. Most people who read Punisher love the Garth Ennis run, Punisher Max, another of those publications from Marvel's Max line. Came out around the same time as Brian Michael Bendis' Alias did. And I think it's awesome too. And I know everybody knows Garth Ennis now, right? He's one of the most famous comic book writers going for his work on The Boys, which became a huge TV show, right? If you haven't seen The Boys, check it out. It's pretty cool. The comic book is cool too. Honestly, I always found Garth Ennis's writing so exaggerated, so over the top, so on purpose edgy that it's almost distracting. And that's the reason Though it is really cool, the Punisher Max run, okay? Don't come at me in the comments about the Punisher Max run. It's cool. But my favorite run on Punisher is actually Chuck Dixon and John Romita Jr.'s Punisher Warzone. And this is maybe not as famous, maybe not as, a renowned run. I would say, I would even go as far as calling it underrated. I think John Romita Jr. draws Frank Castle maybe better than anybody. And I think Chuck Dixon was able to write a really gritty Punisher story, a revenge story, a great story, without taking it to a place where it's just like, okay, he's tearing people apart here, he's ripping people apart there, he's torturing, you don't have to get crazy, you don't have to get over the top with Punisher. We get it, he's tough. And that's why I think Chuck Dixon handled the character really well and told a really cool short story there in Punisher Warzone that is really worth checking out and is one of my favorite superhero comics and makes Punisher, of course, one of the great street level superheroes. At number 2, and this is one where really I could go in almost any direction as far as writer-artist combos, number 2 has to be Daredevil. Daredevil is one of these lucky characters in comic book history where at almost no time in their history has there been a bad run. It's like almost every time there's a new team on Daredevil, they put out an absolutely standout, perfect thing. It's crazy with Daredevil how many runs in a row, how many teams in a row have written a great story, a standout comic book story. It's awesome. You can go as far back as Gene Colan or even further than that to the Stan Lee era. But where things really take on a modern turn, where it starts to feel like the Daredevil we know today, is when you hit the Frank Miller days. Frank Miller, and David Mazzucchelli put on an absolute clinic on Daredevil. And it was that run that helped take comics and comic book storytelling into the modern era. Born Again, based on Frank Miller's comic, is now on TV. It's a series. The Man Without Fear, of course, telling the origin story of Daredevil. That whole Frank Miller run and modernizing all those villains too, like the Kingpin we see today and the Bullseye we see today and so on. That all comes from that Frank Miller run. But my favorite run on Daredevil, despite the Frank Miller run being legendary and being awesome, is actually the Mark Waid run. However, the Mark Waid run is a lot more fantastical and fun and, I hesitate to use the word whimsical, but it's sort of more whimsical, sort of more lighthearted. The best, I think, of the street level Daredevil runs, where you really get a sense of the reality and the grit and the mean streets of Hell's Kitchen, I think I gotta go with Bendis again here. Brian Michael Bendis, and he's gonna feature, believe it or not, he's gonna feature in this list again, has a something going with Daredevil and with other superheroes that he writes, where he's really able to connect to the human side of these characters, like he did with Jessica Jones way back in Alias, way back in 2001. He does again in the more modern era with Matt Murdock and Daredevil. And I think his run on Daredevil is one of the great street level superhero runs in comics. And that's why it's number 2 on my list of best street level superhero. And at number 1, guys, how can I not pick your favorite neighborhood Spider-Man? Peter Parker has been on adventures which have taken him, fairly far and wide, especially with his era fighting alongside the Avengers, right? And taking on Thanos and things like that. Every once in a while, he gets himself in a jam that is truly larger than life. But the best Peter Parker is street level Peter Parker, where he's dealing with teenage character life, protecting and serving, making sure Aunt May doesn't get killed by Doc Ock while he's living at her house, making sure Gwen Stacy doesn't get thrown off any bridges by the Green Goblin, making sure, Harry Osborn stays out of trouble, Flash Thompson stays out of trouble. Those small, I want to say small time, but small world problems, those real world human issues that he has, the interrelationships with the characters around him, the way he plays off his fellow superheroes, his inexperience, it just simply, if you take it all the way back to the Stan Lee, Steve Ditko run, where he's busting bank robbers and things like that, right? There's something so innocent about Spider-Man and the world around him and the problems that he deals with, that even though things occasionally spin out of control and into the supernatural and almost realm of magic, basically, with some of these characters, with some of these villains, there is like a purity to Spider-Man where it starts on those New York streets and it stays on those New York streets. And that's why I think Spider-Man is the greatest of all street level superheroes. The run I would most recommend, and this is crazy, this is near on impossible, guys. I'm a huge fan of John Romita Sr.'s art on Spider-Man, going all the way back to the late 60s and early 70s. I love Roger Stern's era on Spider-Man. I mean, I would love to do an Amazing Spider-Man read-through saga where like every video I talk about 10 issues of Amazing Spider-Man and we go all the way through. But if you're somebody who wants a more modern take on Spider-Man, something more like what we've been seeing on the big screen lately, I can't recommend enough. Wait for it. I'm going to say this name again. Brian Michael Bendis's Ultimate Spider-Man. I think what it is, and what it's kind of cool about it, and the reason why I refused to read it when it came out, is because it's almost like a rewrite, a modernization on the original Amazing Spider-Man, the Lee Ditko run. And back when it was going on, when it was coming out, I was like, what? They're remaking Amazing Spider-Man? No! Like, how dare you? A sacrilegious act is going on. They're rewriting one of the great comic books of all time. No, I will not be reading it. I refuse. And I also thought Bagley's art, at that time when it was coming out, I was like, this is the worst looking book ever. I hated it when it came out. But recently, I've gone back and read it. And let me tell you, I have it right next to me. Actually, it's so stupid. It's so funny. It's so coincidentally, I have it right next to me, guys. This modern era epic, this ultimate, what are they calling it? Ultimate Epic Collection. There's the Epic Collection series. There's many of them behind me. There's the modern era epics. There's this Ultimate Epic Collection run going on right now too. I picked it up. I've been reading through it, and you know what? I gotta hand it to Bendis again for the third time in this video. I don't know what it is about him, but he has something where he can like take a character and bring them home, essentially. Like, what is the smallest world? What is the family dynamic? Who is around them? How do I rewrite the Uncle Ben story to bring it to the modern world type of a thing? And as much as I refused to read it back then, it's so silly. I now check on a daily basis, guys. This is how lost I am. I check on a daily basis to see if there are announcements for the next volume of the Ultimate Spider-Man Epic Collection run, okay? That's where I'm at now. That's what I'm reading, and that's why it's one of the great street-level superhero comics. Okay, I'm gonna get even crazier. Ready? Not only was the Ultimate Spider-Man a rewrite of Amazing Spider-Man, but they have now started another Ultimate Spider-Man run, okay? This time written by Jonathan Hickman, who I actually really like. And this Ultimate Spider-Man may even be better than the original Ultimate Spider-Man. Crazily, it's not a retelling of that original story. It's a completely new original story, like set in an alternate dimension or something like that. Whatever. I don't want to get into the nitty gritty, which is no pun intended, considering we're talking about street level superheroes. It's awesome one way or the other. So Brian Michael Bendis' Ultimate Spider-Man, if you want a modern look at Spider-Man. Jonathan Hickman's Ultimate Spider-Man, if you want a new take on Spider-Man, a whole new origin story, a whole new all that sort of thing. Spider-Man, the greatest street level superhero of all time. That's been the show this week. Stay tuned. See you next time. I'm Dill Comic Books. Goodbye.